Okay, so for the recording, I'm KathySnead. This is going to be a presentation on what I know so far about the Lightroom masking panel. I will attempt to be as accurate as I can be at this point with what I know. So here we go. Can everybody see a red lily?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Fred. Okay, yeah, I forgot about that, and I have to figure out how to get the chat back so I can see it, and it doesn't want to come back. So
That's okay, Kathy. I've got my chat box up, so I'll interrupt when or when you pause and ask. I'll let you know what the chat says.
okay, and then I have to figure out how to get rid of this, and there we go. So can everybody see both panels on the left and right of this lily?
Yes.
Yes.
See the, okay. So over here on the right side, we used to see a radial filter and a linear gradient, and they're gone. What we have is a dot. I thought it'd be funny if they'd put like a face mask there for masking, but maybe they think we're going to get through COVID and they won't do that. But anyway, when you click on this.
Hang on, Kathy. I've got a question right now about what version this is.
Well, this is the latest online version. So if you have the $9.99 or more expensive program with Adobe, where you pay per month and you can update, this is the most updated version where they've eliminated the two things up here above your develop screen for the linear gradient and the radial gradient.
It's version 11.1.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So you get a drop down, and I'm just going to run through what's in the drop down. Select subject, select sky, a brush, a linear gradient, just like we had in the old version, a radial gradient, color range, and luminance range. And then you'll notice this is grayed out here. For me, it's depth range. And the reason it's grayed out is that this photo has no depth range. I think the only cameras that have depth range right now are some of the more advanced phone cameras. If you're working on a photo like that, you'll be able to mask by depth range, but I'm not going to cover this tonight. So to start with this photo, I'm going to show you how to select subject and then what we can do with the background since it's not a sky. So you just hit select subject and it will work. And it'll produce on your screen a color overlay of what it's selected, which it's done pretty good here. First of all, sometimes blue won't be a good color. You can hit the color and you can color pick and change it. You can also turn the overlay off so you can see what you're doing. The little bit confusing thing is on your screen, you've got a color over the selection, but over here in this drop down, it's just like it is in Photoshop where white reveals and black conceals. So it's kind of the opposite of this. So if you just remember that for those of you who don't use Photoshop, that when you look at your mask over here, the white part is what you'll be working on. It just helps to remember that. So I'm going to turn this off and we'll just go down here and make some changes, maybe warm up the flower a little bit. Let's see, maybe open up the whites a little bit. See, brighten it up. And it's also got sharpness. Now, here's a fun thing. It's also got the ability, if you're with me over here on the right, to change the color. If you want to. You can have fun with this. Just when you do this, make sure you don't have use fine adjustment picked, because if you have that picked, it's not going to move much over where it is. So see, it will move very little. But I like the original color, so we'll put that back to 0. So now we've got our flower, and let's say we've got it the way we want it. And I want to knock down the whites in this background. How do I do that? Go up here, create new mask. Now, since we don't have a sky and we don't have, a background masking key, the best way here, since this is simple, is to do select subject again. Okay, so select subject. And then I'm going to go over here to the right panel, go to the very top, see where it says invert over here. Everybody with me, I hope. I just inverted it. Now, for this mask, light reveals what we're working on, color shows you. We're going to work on the background. So let's say we want to turn the exposure down a little bit, knock down those highlights. There we go. So that's a simple one. Done. Here's your before and after. Rather than doing a brush, doing something complicated, you can just do it that way. So that's the first one. The second one I want to show you.
Hang on, Kathy.
Yeah.
Fred has asked if it's possible to enlarge the hue slider.
The which slider?
The hue saturation, HSL slider.
They don't have, I see what you mean. Okay, so let's go back to this. So we can always go back. That's another thing. So I'll open it up and we use that on this. So I want to turn that overlay off. So over here in the right-hand side, and I can move this over. Oh, Fred, this is going to challenge me. I know it'll work, but let's just do it this way. We can make this smaller for now. Go down here. And as long as we're on this, we might as well cover another subject. This is the hue slider. If you leave the check mark on, you're not going to get much of a change. See? It's very slight. Maybe that's what you want. So leave the check mark on. But if you want to really play with the color, then you uncheck, use fine adjustment right here. And then you can go crazy. Now, the reason I said there's another thing we can cover here on color is if you go down to the bottom of the screen, and this is just affecting the mask, this panel, you see where it says color here, and it's got it X'd out because I'm not using a color. If you hit it, you got this panel we've seen before. You can do an overlay on your selection. So let's say you want to give it a more purplish tone. You do that. And then you can come down here and increase and decrease. So that's another thing you can do. You can get pretty wild, but you can also be subtle, and sometimes it'll help. Okay, Ellen, any questions on that? I'll move on to the next one.
No, that was it. I hope Fred, I hope that was what you were wanting to hear.
That helps.
Okay, great. So we'll get done on this one. I don't really need that, so we'll leave that off. And the next one I'm going to do is this one. So little travel photo. What can we do with it? So you'll notice I've done nothing in the normal sliders that would affect everything. And for those who haven't done a lot of masking, it's probably pretty obvious to most people, but like here, I really want to brighten this up, but I don't want to brighten this up too much. And I could use the shadow slider, but that's going to affect this too. So the masking is, just really helpful for something like this. Let's put this back to 0. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is we're going to select the subject and see what we get. Bingo. This is great. You don't always get something perfect, but that's pretty perfect. So turn this off. Let's say since this is the subject, we might want to warm it up a little bit. Might want to up the exposure, really push it up because it's our subject. So that's that. I'm just going to leave it there. Obviously, we could like play with the blacks a little bit and maybe do some work on sharpening. But for the purposes of tonight, I'll just leave it there. Now, the next thing is select sky. Perfect. You don't always get a perfect selection, but I picked this one out because it's pretty clear and it does a great job. So let's turn the overlay off here. That's the color of our sky. What do we want to do with it? Do we want to darken it? Do we want to make it like give it an overlay? Sometimes I put an overlay on my skies to make it seem like we're in the early morning. That's not working maybe, but we'll just do that. Just so you know, I changed the sky. Next one is trickier. This one, these leaves are all green, so I'm going to try a color range. So when you pick color range right here, click on it, and then when you go over to the photo, you get your old eyedropper, and you want to find a place on these leaves, and I'm going to have to bring this over, where you don't have any sky popping through, because you don't want to get the blue. So I think maybe here. See, that didn't work because I got that too. So the thing you do when that happens, see these dots next to the mask, 3 dots, click on them, and you got a drop down. You can name your mask, intersect, I'll explain a little later, but you can also delete it. And in this case, I just delete it and I do it again. Color range, and we'll try over here. So obviously what we've got is we've got some green in this thing here. The only thing you can do in that case is brush it off, and that's what I'm gonna do, or put a radial filter over it.
Hey Kathy, I have an option for you.
Yeah,
Go to subject under your mask 3.
and revert it.
No, delete subject.
Yeah, you can do that too. Yeah, so how you do that, is this Ron? Was that Ron?
No, this is Dick.
Okay, Dick. Well, you've just pointed out one thing along with what I was saying. There's many ways to skin the cat, many times here. So subtracting is what you want to do, but you can subtract with the brush. You can subtract with the radial filter, or like you said, you can subtract your subject. So did everybody see subtract? And then I'm gonna subtract the subject. And it's gone. And the neat thing is, you look up here, this is your mask, but this is your subject that was deleted. And if you look here very closely, there's a minus sign to remind you that you use subtract there. So now to work on the leaves, bring their exposure up a little bit, maybe the shadows up. They're not cooperating with me a lot. But you can play with them and get some detail out of them. Earlier, when I was doing that, it was perfect. And then sometimes, like I said, you get aberrations, and you see that is down here. We got something over there. I think it's another building, but that you can take out separately. But for the purposes of showing you how to select things, that does it. So now we've covered selecting the mask and also subtracting to get your leaves, your final product. So the next one I want to cover is, yeah, okay. So this is, get it here, one I've worked on. And these are all the different masks. And when you look at the masks to understand what has happened, they don't show you the subtractions when you bring your panel back up. So you click on this and it shows you, okay, all I did there was select the subject. Then the next one, all I did there was select the subject, and then I inverted, because you can see, no, I did something else there. I know what I did there. I'll explain this. This is the one where I inverted to get the background. And this is the one that I did a little magic on. So I'm going to take you to this one and just repeat what I did on that one. So first we need to crop this. And this is where I'm going to show you a little trick on select subject. So if I do this, select subject, and understand there's a reflection down there on the bottom of the vase, it's not going to get it. But let's delete this and go back and get out of the masking panel. And temporarily, I'm going to up the exposure. So now you can see the whole vase and you can see there's a reflection. I'll go to the masking panel and hit select subject. and it didn't cooperate and give me the reflection. So doggone you. Get away. Let's try this again. So we're going to put even more light on it. Okay. This will come in, like there's different ways you can highlight what you want to select. I mean, this is what works here. You can see now I got it. I got this and I got this. I got it all. So then what you do is you got it, but you sure don't want it with that kind of exposure. So you just back out, bring this back to 0 or wherever you had it, and then go back to your masking panel, go to this mask, and now you can work on it. Increase the exposure, bring the shadows up, let's bring a little texture in it. It's not giving me much down here, but I'm going to get to that. We'll create a little saturation, and I'm going to, since it's our subject, warm it up a little bit. So now I want to get down here. How do I do that? This is where intersect comes in. And for you logic people, it doesn't mean add, it doesn't mean subtract. It means you have to meet both criteria. So I'm going to create a new mask. I'm going to select subject. Hopefully it'll select doggone it. Okay, so there's a way around this. We'll delete this. So here's the way around. We don't want to go back to what I had before with everything bright to get that mask we've got. What I'll do is I click on this and then I click over here and I'm going to duplicate it. So now I've got not only the top part, but I've got the bottom part too. And here's the intersect, what you do. I don't want to work on this up here. I just want to work on this. How do I eliminate that? There's a number of ways. I could eliminate it by subtracting a radial gradient down here. And that might be the easiest way, frankly, but I want to show you intersect, so we're going to do it that way. So intersect mask with a linear gradient. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the linear gradient from the bottom up here. Should show me the color there. Show the overlay. See what's happening? My mask now is just on the area now, right here, that is included both in the linear gradient and in select subject. So now I can work on just the bottom. We want to see how this effect here. We want to reset that. Okay. And then turn the overlay off again. I can bring that up. Bring the shadows up. Now, if we were going to work on this and really work on it, I'd do this a third time. And I'd copy the subject, and then intersect it with a linear gradient that just goes down here. But for sake of time, because it's already 7:30 and I've got oodles of things to cover, I'm going to just do this. I'm going to go back to mask 1. I'm going to duplicate it. It should work, it did. And then to do the background, get a proper black, we come over here and invert. And there's our background. So if it wasn't black, and you can see this was a one of those threefold black things with a black glass bottom. So we'll just, first of all, change the effect. Every time you do something, it turns that on. And bring the exposure down till we've got a pure black. So are there any questions on that one?
Okay, so Kathy, we had two questions while you were doing that demonstration. Ann Zimmerman asked, and I think you reiterated this after she asked it, about using the invert to get your background.
Right. And the thing to remember about inversion is it usually only works when you've had one selection on your main and then you go to invert. If you've done a brush or, you know, you've got something complicated, a lot of times this ability over here to invert will go away. That's why taking it back to something simple like this mask worked. But like, let's say if I went up here just for grins, see, it went away because I did an inversion. See, this is the one where I did an inversion. And if I want to invert that selection there to get all the rest of this, it won't let me. So there's limitations on when you can invert. Brushes are definitely one of them, but doing an intersection is another one. And I'll give you another hint about brushes. If you ever want to create presets, and I'll show you a preset example, you don't want to use a brush because it just won't work. You can use the gradients, you can use radial filters, you can use select subject, select sky, but a brush won't work when you transfer it over to a new photo with a preset. What was the other question, Ellen?
Okay, so Lauren wanted to point out about not needing to, that it's not necessary to manually unclick show overlay, that it kind of does it itself. And you kind of mentioned that later, that when you use the slider, the overlay shows and does and then turns off. Is that?
Yeah, it just annoys me, and that's why I keep clicking it off.
Okay.
Because I
okay.
want to see it without show overlay, and the doggone thing won't stay on sometimes, you know, stay off, and it just annoys me, and that's why I click it off again.
Okay, because Lauren wanted to point out that apparently when you move the slider, it automatically
Comes off.
goes away. Yeah.
Yeah, good point.
Okay.
Ellen, if you're having trouble, I'm not Ellen, Kathy, getting the overlay to stay on or off, the O key absolutely toggles it.
Do you have to do shift with it or command?
No, just hit the O.
Okay. Oh, you're right, Tom.
Ooh.
Oh, boom. Okay. We're all learning.
Great.
Okay.
Well done.
Go on to the next one. Okay, the next one, little flower here with a very annoying background. I just want to go through this real quick to show you something you can do with something that has pretty crisp edges. So we'll do select subject. And I'm not going to mess with the flower. Obviously, you can change it. I'm going to invert it. And then I'll hit O. And then, you know, this is annoying. So you can turn your texture down. You can turn your clarity down. Turn your sharpness down. And then, of course, on this one, we hit the highlights and darken it a little bit. Not that much. to make it a little better. What I want to point out is it's possible to do that and get away with it without it looking funky, as long as you don't carry it too far. And as long as it's something where you've gotten a real good mask. A lot of times on people with hair, it's not going to work. So just keep that in mind if you want to blur your background for something like this. It helps. I mean, obviously you can't totally blur this, but you can bring it down a lot. But if there was a person there with nice curly hair, you're not going to get the selection you can on this, and it's going to show up. So that's just a word to the wise on that one. Okay, so the next one, I'm going to do a travel one. This is kind of fun. This is Budapest. Sadly, the last Viking trip I took before COVID. So I'm going to bring this down just because that's a lot of sky. Okay, so what will work here? Well, if we try select subject, watch what happens. It's just not going to work. So what will work is if you do select sky. You can work on the sky first. And here's the thing. So you look at this and you think, oh, shoot, look at that. It got this building too. The way to check that, because sometimes it's tricky. Sometimes it'll look like it's included something like this, but it hasn't, is to go over here and invert it. And it hasn't. See, when you invert it, this is part of the inverted selection. At least most of it is. So it's going to be good enough for the sky. So I'll go back. So hitting O. Let's say on the sky, we want to give it a little pump, some contrast, maybe some texture in those clouds. Okay, so that's the sky. Now, how to do this when you want to change this? Again, you go to this mask, and you go over here, and you duplicate it. And then you invert it. So now it's covering all of this, but you don't want it to cover the river. And if you're going to do a preset, you could call the river foreground / river. And you could do a preset with buildings, a sky, and a foreground that could be grass or river, something like that. So what we want to do is subtract this. So subtract, I'm going to use a linear gradient, and I'm going to bring it up here to about where the boats are. I mean, it's not going to be exact, but close enough. Okay, right there. So now, I'll go back. We've got a overlay on our buildings. Now, when you go over here, because I duplicated and inverted, see, I've got what I did to the clouds. You want to hit double click effect to bring it back to where it was. And I think with those buildings, gotta really warm them up, like they're getting some sunshine, give them a little texture, and just leave it go there. Then, got a river. So let's do something with our foreground. So we want to select a linear gradient this time, and I'll actually select the river. And maybe we'll make it like not quite as sharp and take a little of the texture and make it a nice smooth river. Play with the saturation. We don't want the river to be the target, but now you've got this nice mask for travel that has basically a foreground, the buildings and the sky. So you go over here, first of all, and let's rename these. So this first one was sky. Okay, so name it sky. Second one, buildings. Okay. And third one was foreground. I'll rename that foreground. Okay. Then I'll go over here to my preset. Let's see. And see where I am in the left-hand side here of my screen. Hit the plus sign, create preset, little preset. I'm going to have everything come over. And I'm going to click masking. I'm going to keep this, the white balance and everything, because you can always change it when you bring it over to another photo. And I'm going to call it masking sky buildings foreground. Now, if you're like on a Viking trip or similar, and you have a lot of those photos to create here, every time you do get something like this, you can come over here and use your preset. And we're going to do a, let's see, a person next. Yeah. And I'll show you how to apply a preset. I'm not going to do that on this one. Okay. Any questions? Okay.
I don't have any new questions in the chat,
Okay.
but this is intriguing. Thank you, Kathy.
Yeah, actually, I'm not going to do a person next. I'm going to do a couple others and then we'll get to the person. And you'll love the person one, Ellen, with what you do.
Okay, good. I'm looking forward to it.
Okay. So this one, night sky, and I think this was Budapest too. So just to start out with, normally when I do night photos, I take the temperature slider down because normally you get this like brownish color in your blacks. So I just take it down and cool it off a little bit. Okay, so that's our starting point. And my goal here is to make this bridge and these buildings and these lights really stand out. So the mask I'm going to use is a luminous range. It's down here, right-hand side, click on it. And then you get the little dropper, just like you do with the color range. And what I'm going to use is up here. So I don't get any of these other colors. I'm just going to use this. Bingo. Every place you've got a little reflection, we've got a mask now. Now, what I've done, I actually did this photo separately. I've actually subtracted some of the reflections down here, but I'm not going to take the time to do that. I'm just going to show you what we can do with this luminous range mask we've got. Turning the overlay back on, if you go over here, you can see you've got a slider because you can play with what the selection is. So you can make it more by sliding this down, or you can bring it back up and make it more restrictive. So you work on it till you're happy with what you want to have in your mask. I really want to get all those little lights, and I think that's pretty good. And that's what we'll work on. So down here, I'm going to pull the highlights just about all the way down. And then I'm going to see how far I can push it without blowing anything out. We're getting some blowout, but not a lot if you look at the, so I'm going to push it a little further. And then, because that's our subject with the lights, I'm going to warm it up because they were warm to begin with. I toned down with blue the entire picture. So I'm going to bring them back, but I'm just bringing it back on the lights, not on the black background here. And that's it. That's it. And I'll show you the difference. It's subtle. Well, maybe not so subtle, but quick. You know, I just, to do that with a brush or something like that would take forever. So, any questions?
No, none yet, except I have a comment that I'm kind of mad because this looks so easy. And I spent years mastering masks in Photoshop. And this is like,
Sucks for you.
yes, Dave says
I
sucks for
know.
me. So,
Like those, what are they, those TF luminous masks that,
yeah, TK, Tony Kuiper's TK actions.
Oh, does this replace?
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yes.
Exactly.
God.
And now we have this.
Yeah, well, obviously there's a lot that you can still do with TK actions, but this is this looks like a lot more fun than the way I've been doing it. So I'm impressed. I really am.
Yeah. And it's just really, it's so quick. That's the thing that's, and you could do a preset on this. And, you know, I don't know, I've got tons of night photos of some of the places we saw. I could use a preset and hopefully a lot of times it'd work. But even if it didn't, I could still adjust, come over here when you're in the preset and adjust here on the right-hand side, this slider to take in or move out some of the luminous range to suit a different photo and very quickly. So it's because these kind of lights at night, it seems to me from what I've been working on, kind of are in the same color range, the same luminous range. So you can work on a bunch of them and just go pretty quickly. So I want to do a person next. We're going to
Kathy?
review the landscapes, but for the people who do photos of people, I want to show you what you can do here. This-
Hang on, Kathy. Did someone have a comment?
Yeah, I have a question. On that luminance slider, why
yeah,
are there two little triangle points?
yeah, they are. There are. So this is the bright side, right? Well, you can move the bright side down and this down. See how it's taking the brighter away?
Okay.
And we're really limiting it. Or
Uh-huh.
you can bring the dollar ones out. See how that brings that shadows down here under the bridge out.
Yes,
Yeah, so you can play with it a lot.
okay, thank you.
Uh-huh. Okay, people, this is the daughter. So let's work on her a little bit. So select subject. Great. So let's just brighten her up a little bit. Let's warm her up just a little bit, not too much. But then we've got her skin and her blouse, and I don't like the blouse. I don't like the color. So what do? Okay, we've done this. We've got her face needs a little work, and I don't like her blouse. Okay, that's what we're gonna tackle. So create new mask. I'm gonna do select subject again. I'm gonna do the blouse first. This is really fun. We're gonna intersect with a color range. We're going for the blouse. So I want to get a good right there. Get her face. Okay, so we've got a pretty good one here, but we want to subtract a radial gradient. And just pull it up here, pull it here. Not going to be able to be exact. We don't want to do her skin. Okay. So the rest of it, probably I would do a brush and just brush that off. And that's kind of makes a lot more work, but I wanted to show you how to change colors. And we'll just say we did that. Okay, now we've got her blouse. Again, I think we did this before, but this, well, I've done something wrong. I need to see what I've done. I was on the subtraction. I wasn't on the blouse. So see, now I'm on the blouse. And I have no idea, guys, why it's not working. You know, I just goofed. So I already showed you the colors. So let's just delete that one. That's no fun. Okay, I'm gonna be happy with her blouse choice, but her face, I wanna make her a little softer. So let's do a radial gradient. Face. Get it. I'm gonna do, if you guys know, I turned the feather off. I'm gonna turn the feather over here on the right, back on again a little bit. Take that blue color off. Nah, we'll just open her face up a little bit more. We don't want a lot of shadows. And then let's just soften the texture and the clarity. Okay, well, that's great for the skin, not so hot on her eyes. So here's the beauty, and you could do this in old Lightroom too. Create a new mask, another radial gradient, put a radial gradient over a radial gradient. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do a radial gradient for her eyes. Well, just about there. And don't show the overlay. And on that, we're going to up the contrast. We're going to up the texture, saturation a little bit, sharpness definitely. And you can see the difference between this eye when I pull away and the other eye. So how do we get one over here? Well, that's easy. You go over here to your eye mask, get this, hit duplicate. Now we've got another one, and we'll just put it over here. Should work. We should have the same thing. Yep, we do, on each eye. Okay. So, same change. That's great. So now I'm going to create another mask for the background. So I'm not going to select sky because that'll just get us this. I'm going to select subject again. And I could have copied the one we had. And then go over here on the right, invert it. I got the background. So the background, I'm going to tone down the exposure, take the highlights down. Again, I could play with the sky and make it great. I'll make it a little cooler, the whole thing, just to have her stand out. She's warmer, background's cooler. She's got a little hair here. So making that background, taking the clarity down, the sharpness, you got to be careful because it'll start to look weird. So I'm just going to take the sharpness down a little bit and let it rest there. So now I'm going to create a preset. I go over here on the left, create preset, and I'm going to put all the masking in, and I'm going to call this one person with background. Create. And before we go away, I'm going to rename these. So when I get to the other picture, I'll know where I am. So this is the background. I1. I2. Face softening. Person. Okay, so now we've got it all named. So I'm done. Now I'm going to go the next photo. Also the daughter. And I'm going to go over here and I'm going to grab this preset. Okay, let's see if it's there. So I'll go over to the masking button. It's all there, but nothing's happened. So why? Well, the reason is every one of these has to be updated. It has to find the subject again. The face has to be placed. It might not be in the right place. So on mask one, there we go. You hit it and you see this update over here on the right. Just hit update and it's detecting the subject again for you. But then it's going to apply all the changes you made to the subject. You may want to tweak them or they may be fine. So let's just say they're fine. So mask 2, you don't have to update that. It can't update it automatically. You have to do it. Move it around till you get it where you want it. Maybe I don't want it on her hair. Oh, down here. Something like that. Maybe get a little less feather. There. So now she needs a little more exposure on that face. Maybe not that much. Little more shadows up. There we go. So my names didn't come over, guys, and I can't explain that, why the names didn't come over. I think they didn't come over because I didn't name them before I created the preset. So I think that's the mistake I made, not renaming these and then creating the preset. But we know that this is an eye, definitely in the wrong place. We'll move it. Right. Move it. And this one has to be updated. This is the background. Show the overlay. There you got the background. So maybe on this background, you want to turn the exposure down more, but that's how you do it, and it's pretty quick. So that's the preset. Any questions? You guys are sharp.
I don't have any in the chat, so I think
Okay.
you're doing great there, Kathy.
Well, I'm either boring everybody or they've all left their machines. Okay. Let's see what else I wanted to do. Didn't do this one yet. I had to throw a bird in. This isn't a wonderful photo. So I'll straighten it out to begin with because it's going to annoy all of us. Crop it. Okay, I'm showing you this one because it demonstrates something that you don't always get, a subject that's correctly masked. So on this one, I'm going to select subject. And I want to zoom in and see how didn't get it right there. And it didn't exactly get it right there. So how do you fix that? Now you see here, you can't see that add and subtract over here. And the reason is you just have to click in the middle here and it comes back. So what we want to do is we want to subtract something to get that out of there. And what we can subtract is a color range. And bingo, it's got a better mask. Now, doesn't look like it got exactly everything. So you can refine the selection over here on the right. Do that. So we can come this way, we'll go that way. And it got a little more of it. So, fun thing to do with this is to apply some color and I'll just show you a little trick. So this is pretty boring back here. And you know how a lot of times on sunsets, you've got bands of color and it's darker and then lighter. Well, you can do that here. So I'm going to create a new mask and I'm going to select the sky. Did it do? Okay. I must have hit the wrong thing. Good. Okay. see if it excludes the bird. Okay. So let's say what we want to do is create, instead of a solid color, something that's more graduated. Well, the way you can do that is start to work on the color here, and I'm going to be really quick on this. So let's say we want to do a color overlay. Oh. And see, it won't go off with O then. Let's try this, yeah. Maybe a little more. Let's see, it's just solid color. So the way to make that look a little realer is to subtract linear gradient and bring it down from here. Remember, we're not affecting our bird because he's not in this original selection. And then just make it, you know, a gradual thing where you've got that band down here at the bottom. Oh, that's not bad. So like that. And then you could, when we go back to the bird, obviously, you could bring the bird out of shadows. You have to be careful because he's so dark, he's going to have a lot of noise. But you can improve him a little bit. So that's that. That's how to do a graduated sunset when you don't have one. Okay. Okay, this is the last one. I think, yeah. This is the most complicated one. So this is kind of a blah photograph I picked out. And then, with the help of masking, I changed it to that. And this has all these masks. I did this sky, and you can see it here. Did the mountains. I got a little bit of that in, but that doesn't matter. I did the mountains. I did the ocean. I did the upper sky, because let's just turn these off and I'll show you. Turn them off on this clicker here. We can go back to the original. So this was the original sky. And then when I did it, I took the exposure down a little bit. I adjusted the hue. I moved the saturation up a little bit. And then the mountains, right there, show the overlay. Whoops. There. I did that dehaze flyer, Tom. Did some texture, whites, contrast. Took the exposure down a little bit. The ocean, I moved the whites up a little bit, gave it a lot more contrast, moved the texture up, moved dehaze up. Is that the ocean? No, sorry about that. I moved the texture and clarity all the way down, and I didn't do much else to it except I did move the saturation down. I thought the ocean took away from the scene, so I moved it down. Then see how this upper sky is dead? So I did a mask for the upper sky. And the way I did that was Come on, show all this. Okay. I did the sky, then I subtracted color range, and I put a linear gradient up there, and I ended up with just this part up here. And the changes I made to it, where I increased the saturation, I really increased the hue, and I did a lot of dehaze. Then the fog. Now see, look at this fog. It's kind of just there. This thing, you lose this thing sometimes. The fog's just kind of there. And the fog took a lot of work. So, show you what I did on the fog. So first I did a linear gradient that put, what did I do there? Texture in that part of the fog. Then I did another linear gradient that limited, see it's a minus. So when I did the first linear gradient, it was affecting everything up here. And then with the second one, I brought it down so it was just affecting this line across here. See if we can see that. That's the linear gradient. What you want to see is where, yeah, I'm not showing you this very good, but trust me, it's affecting this line through here, and I've got to get this stuff out of it. So then I did another linear gradient here that took that side of it off. I did a brush up here to take that out. And then I did a brush where I added some light and texture so it wasn't a stark line. So that fog went from this to this. And it seems like it took a lot of time, but it really didn't. And the next thing I did was the trees and the rock. And that again was a whole line of adjustments so I could just get these trees and this rock, no ocean. So first I used a linear gradient. No, first I used the color range. That's right. I'm going in opposite order. I told you guys that I had not explained this before, but first I used the color range. And I picked the green, and I'll show you what it picked out. Oh, there. And there is what I ended up with, but it's not showing all the work I did through here. So I can redo it if you want to, but what I'm struggling with, Ellen, is we're running out of time. So I can start this one again. It's the last one, but it's a complicated one.
Well, I think you've done a great job of just giving everybody an idea of what can be done. This is I've got great comments in the chat that are just Betty is anxious to try it, and Fred says it's pretty amazing, and Penny says amazing too. So I think you got us all quite intrigued.
Oh, good.
So I think we're good. Fred does ask if these are masking tools that are also in Camera Raw, and I'll let you explain that one.
If they are what?
If they're in Camera Raw.
I shoot in Camera Raw, but I don't understand the question. Lightroom isn't destructive.
Okay, I wonder if he's thinking also about ACR, Adobe Camera Raw.
Yes.
Right. Okay, so that's what he means, and yes, Fred, you can use the mask. Well, therefore, then you're using the masks in Photoshop, not in Lightroom.
Okay.
limitations that JPEG has as to the adjustability of exposure and things of that nature.
Well, you've given us a lot to think about, Kathy. This is
Okay.
wonderful.
Well, I'll give you the screen back so I can see everybody. Well, I think I will. There we go. There.
No, you got it. See, we're all awake.
Okay.
Oh, okay, for me, it's after 10 o'clock for me.